Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Wrestlenomics Radio, a special edition, a live edition, live from Buffalo, New York. I'm Brandon Thurston.
I'm Chris Harrington.
This is a Laserdisc enthusiast that I found.
Yeah, I'm trying to move to a new house right now, and this involves putting as much stuff as I can in storage. And so I carried a tub of Laserdiscs to the storage unit on Tuesday, and I think I broke my shoulder.
Did you?
So I think my time in the sun with Laserdiscs might have finally reached its might be in its nadir.
Wow. What is your most recent Laserdisc purchase?
Probably Tin Cup. We discovered
the Kevin Costner film.
Yeah, we discovered that the movie Tin Cup was available on Laserdisc for less than $10. So much so that, in fact, you can buy maybe 10 or 12 copies of the movie Tin Cup and send one to each of your friends.
Wow.
Which may be what we did.
Okay. Wonderful. Looks like the stream is going okay.
Good. I think we have 2 viewers, maybe even 3 viewers. So, real
Something
exciting
like that.
stuff.
What is the most recently produced Laserdisc that you have?
So they stopped making Laserdiscs in 2001. So
wow.
you can't even make a
Can't do that
Laserdisc
anymore.
in the universe anymore. There's no Laserdisc factories. There's no way to, like, the clean room that's required for them. So I think I have a couple movies from either 2000 or 2001. Like it's not quite that late, but like Toy Story and things you don't think about, but they're on Laserdisc.
1996. That's
Okay, but I think there's a Nick Cage film that's one of the very last Laserdiscs that was ever
a
released.
Nick Gage film.
Nick Cage.
Oh, okay. I think I've heard of him.
Yes.
Not to be confused with
Christian Cage, Ethan Page, or
yes,
Adam Page.
Adam Page, Johnny Cage from Mortal
Mortal
Kombat.
Kombat. Yep.
Yes. Our regular co-host Chris Gullo is in Las Vegas right now.
Ooh.
There's a Bills game though happening right now in
Yeah,
Buffalo against the
that's true.
Washington football team.
Mhm.
At Mookie's request, we have shut off the TV that is right behind the camera because it would be distracting.
Mhm.
But Chris Gullo is away, and joining us this weekend is the originator, founder, inventor of Wrestlenomics, Mookie. Chris Harrington is here.
It's good to be here. It's a show in Rochester on Wednesday for AEW Dynamite,
Yes.
and so I'm in town early, and I'm doing the, shaking hands and kissing babies to make sure that we have that Blue Cross Arena
Putting up posters on the telephone poles, right?
right out there. It says Indie Show, come this way. And like when I used to come to Buffalo for like was it old school pro wrestling?
OSPW.
OSPW, yeah.
Yes.
And like this was almost the proto Facebook era, that back when we even still had MySpace and Friendster.
Yep.
And you would just sometimes write down all the directions to get to a show on the poster because we didn't have
Yeah.
connected devices. So
Right. How did you get there?
And the problem with these kind of shows is a lot of them were just like, go to the field. At the end of the field, turn onto this empty parking lot, and there'll be a show there tomorrow. And you're like, no, I don't think there is. And then you show up, and there'll be 100 people there.
Right.
Because we were in the like golden era of wrestling.
Yes.
And people would just show up in the middle of nowhere to watch wrestling.
That's when the business was hot.
Business used to be hot. That's
Now
true.
you have to book stars and market your shows with
Yeah.
advertisements
That
and
is-
things of that nature.
That is accurate.
So we are here at Wrestlenomics headquarters. Your first ever visit to Wrestlenomics headquarters.
That's true.
This is Fozzie Bear here, who is also joining us. He's a big Bills fan, but he's taking a nap right now. I think the game is kind of boring him. But,
It's exciting having a third co-host. It's a good
yes,
one.
Yes. There he is. So, anything interesting in the world of wrestling business lately? I heard there was an AEW show in New York City recently.
Yeah, we had.
How did that go?
It went exceptionally well because we did have the vaccine mandate for New York City, and I was not sure if we would have everybody show up. And then we had Elevation taping, then we did a 2-hour Dynamite, then we did 2 hours of Rampage, and we went up to 11:58 p.m. And when John Moxley's music hit, I went out to the floor and I looked up and I looked in the furthest corner of the arena that I could see. And there were still people sitting in the last seats at the arena. And it blew my mind. So, I mean, if there was 20,000 people when we started the show, it felt like there were still 18 or 19,000 at the end of the show, which blew my mind because I really thought on a Wednesday night after about 11, a lot of people would be getting antsy and getting out of there.
Yeah. So the vaccine requirement was something that was added like 2 weeks before or something, a week before, right?
I think the messaging that we put out, yeah. I mean, basically, when the U.S. Open,
Yeah.
since we did this at Arthur Ashe Stadium, which, by the way, if you are a wrestling company, get a tennis stadium. They are fantastic. Good lines of sight everywhere. And nice small floor. So unlike a lot of other sports that you can't really play there, except for maybe table tennis, it's beautiful for that. And you know, you get some nice 400 or 500 seats on the floor and all that. So it was great for that. But I don't remember what the question was.
I'm wondering, like, were there people who?
Oh, the messaging. So the USTA, the US Open was there. And they had a vaccine requirement. Mm-hmm. So once, you know, we're basically the same building, and so that they made that choice. I think it was also in consultation probably with the New York City government and, you know, Queens and things of that nature. But we also have a vaccine requirement here for our show in Rochester. So, you know, obviously people will be showing their Excelsior Pass, which something I'd never seen in my life.
Yeah.
I was just like, oh, fax me. What's going on here?
Right.
When
I
someone
have the Excelsior Pass on my phone right now.
Yeah, in fact, somebody was telling me that theirs expires the day of the show, and they're very nervous about it. And
the vaccine expires.
Well, their pass, you have to, you know, click a button or something to get it, the update or something with it. But I was just like, I guarantee you, they just are going to say, okay, and that at least my experience for a lot of these venues that they're not always as
they're not really scrutinizing the proof. But
you know, I can't say if they will or won't. It's whatever the arena rule is. We follow local and state regulations. But I mean, if we've ever been to a concert, sometimes it seems like they're IDing everyone, and sometimes it seems like they're just kind of waving people through. So I can't predict what it's going to be like, but I'm really happy that we have that opportunity to do shows here in New York that way. These are our first New York shows. Rochester was going to be the first AEW show in New York back in March of 2020.
Right.
When we stopped taping after, I think we were in Colorado or Utah, one of the two. We was back-to-back weeks. Yep. And I think it was Utah, actually. I think we were in Utah. And while the show was, yes, it was Salt Lake City. Because while the show was going on, that's when the NBA basically announced that they were doing it. And so from the beginning of the show to the end of the show was this kind of like we were like, oh, it's probably 80% chance we're going to go to Rochester. And then we're like, oh, it's about 70%, 60. And then by the next day it was down to like 15%. And then shortly after that, we canceled the whole show. So it is a homecoming to come back to Rochester a year and a half later than I expected. But it's neat in the sense that like these are our first New York shows. So this is really exciting because it's a new state and new crowd. And we just announced we're going to be going to Minneapolis, my new town of home.
Going from Rochester, where you're originally from,
yes,
and now this is the Full Gear pay-per-view is in Minneapolis.
I think we've announced that the Rampage is in Minneapolis.
Okay.
On November 12th.
Okay.
And
is there a
the
date for
Full Gear, yeah. So I think we announced that the Full Gear pay-per-view is November 13th.
Okay. But that is not announced what the location is for Full Gear.
I do not recall if it's been announced or not.
Okay. But Rochester is this Wednesday.
Yes.
Is this these are your old stomping grounds where you used to stomp, and this is a meaningful show. This was originally supposed to be the show where Brody Lee was going to debut back pre-pandemic, right?
Yes and no. It worked out that way. We booked the building way in advance, not with the intention Brody Lee is coming in to this company. We, I think, had booked in 2019 that we were going to Rochester. We didn't negotiate with Brody's lawyer or manager for his contract until it was Miami of 2020, and that was like a January show. That was like our Bash of the Beast show, I think. I remember I was wearing like a Tommy Bahama crazy hat and shirt and thing. I was like Tony Schiavone inspired gear, and we had a big, negotiation that whole night to get that deal done. So, we didn't know in advance, but then when we did the math, we said, oh gosh, this could work out really well. It was also, people might forget, was when Matt Hardy debuted.
Yes.
Both Matt Hardy
Same
and Brody Lee came on board at the same time, and they were in some ways kind of both slotted for the similar Dark Order thing, where we were teasing a little bit that the Exalted one was coming, but it wasn't 100% clear. Would that be like a broken Matt Hardy? Would that be Brody Lee? Would that be someone else that we've never even seen yet? Yes. So it was certainly a fun time. But yeah, it'll be neat being back. I do think that members of Brody Lee's family will be there. I think his brother's coming. I think his wife is coming, and their kids and things. So that's going to be really fun to just have everybody there together, and might even be on camera once or twice. So that'll be neat if they want to do that.
Cool. So the Arthur Ashe show.
Yep.
The most highly attended AEW event in history.
Yes, yeah. I mean, our biggest events have been the Arthur Ashe show, the United Center show we did in Chicago,
Newark.
The Newark show that we just did at the Prudential Center, and then our Vegas shows. So, the first MGM Grand Garden Arena show, and probably I can't remember the attendance, but the Wintrust in Chicago was pretty big, and then Sears Center is pretty big. Yeah. So, those are the
first Dynamite 2 in Washington.
Yes, the first
DC?
Dynamite we did was in Washington D.C. in a big NBA arena, and that was a big show too. Right. So that was but definitely a lot more here.
Yeah. The biggest live gate too, it seems. Like the Observer is reporting $960,000 in ticket revenue.
I mean, there's 20,000 people there, and you can do the math yourself on what
I've done the math on Twitter.
You would think it is. And what's nice about New York City is that it is a marketplace where it supports generally decently high ticket prices. Mm-hmm. And so, even at only a $45 cost or $50 cost, when you take into account that we had ringside seats that you could bring home with you and things like that. Yeah, we had about 500 custom seats there. So you're going to charge more on those kind of chairs. But, it was great. It was wonderful. I actually spent a lot of time walking around the crowd and on all three levels, the very bottom floor, the middle, and the very top. I was in all of them. Just to really get a feel for what it was like. And it was funny because there was just lines everywhere, and sometimes it even seemed like people didn't know why they were in line. They were just in line. But it was great. It was a lot of fun. Shad Khan, Tony's dad, came for the show, and so always really great to get to speak with him. And yeah, it was.
He comes to some of the bigger shows, it seems.
A lot of times. I mean, he's a very, very busy guy. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's certain towns that he has more interest in because he has a connection to it. So whether it's Chicago or when we did Champaign or whether it's New York City, I think it's also easier for his accommodations that he can fly in and out and be there. But no, he really enjoys seeing our big successful shows, and he keeps close tabs on what's happening. He has lots of questions for everyone, and he just enjoys meeting people and going around, and he's a fun guy to have there. I mean, Tony is involved in every bit of AEW as you can imagine, but it's fun to also see someone like his father who has such a great mind and also is really intrigued by what's happening, and it's a good experience.
Yeah. See, and you're doing a lot of traveling for this. You were just as you we're sitting down here, we're having some pizza. You've been
with pineapple on it.
With pineapple on it. You've been bouncing around to I don't even know what San Diego to Chicago to Milwaukee. Yeah. You are hanging out all throughout upstate New York.
Right now, yeah.
Is the travel? That's a lot of travel. When we were doing the podcast before, you were traveling a lot for your previous job.
Yep.
How it would be hard for me to travel this much.
I think the thing that's tough is sometimes you have travel and it's more predictable in the sense that like maybe you're going to the same hotel every week, even if when I was consulting that would happen. And so you can at least adapt your schedule to what it's like at that hotel. When we're on the road every week, it's a different hotel, it's a different setup, and that can be tough. And then just in terms of timing, I'm really lucky that I live in Minneapolis, so I can fly out of an airport that is a hub to almost everywhere. About the only place you can't get to in one stop is Rochester and Jacksonville. Like both those directs have kind of evaporated over the last year and a half here. But beyond that, you can get places. So that's not so hard. What is tough was, your day starts at maybe noon or 1 on show day, goes to probably midnight or later, and then you might have a 6 a.m. flight or something. So it's like you're constantly with that question of like, do I really want to go to bed for 3 hours or 2 hours? Is that going to be worse than just staying up?
Are you sleeping?
On the plane sometimes, yeah. Yeah, on the weekends, like normally on a Sunday.
Is sleep your competition?
No, I don't view sleep as competition.
Is it personal competition for you?
What do you mean?
Not getting enough sleep and having to,
No. I'm it's, at home. It's not so bad anymore.
No.
Yeah, usually I can go home and get good night's rest.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of hotels,
Yeah.
I think back often to this, and we're now just over 3 years. What's 2021 minus 2018? We're about 3 years removed from All In, which was September 1st,
Yep.
2018. You and I went to Chicago.
Yep. To the
more specifically Schaumburg.
We went to the Sears Center at the time. It's now called the Now Arena, but it was the Sears Center at that time.
Corporate sponsor.
Yep.
And you let me sleep on your hotel couch, and you knew, and I knew through you that there was a thing that Tony Khan was doing. Nobody really in the wrestling world knew well who Tony Khan was at that time. And maybe there was a thing that was going to happen. Maybe it wasn't. Who knew? But I remember talking quite a bit about what the future of wrestling would be. Would this thing really work out? Would you guys really get TV? Would everything fall into place? Reflecting on that, how has AEW exceeded your expectations, met your expectations relative to maybe what you thought it was going to become in 2018?
I think, obviously, you cannot set expectations and expect them, A, to have not changed because of COVID, and B, not evolve because of the way television worked. So I think when we came out of the gate, we did better ratings than I ever expected us to do. I think when we had the competition with NXT on a Wednesday night, that went much differently than I would have expected it to go.
What did you expect going in?
I guess I didn't think it would be something that I thought it'd be a little bit more neck and neck.
Yeah.
I didn't think that it would necessarily seem to just evolve in a very different pattern like it did. Certainly, we always had plans. Hey, we want to go to New York City. Hey, we want to go to the UK. And some of those things we've achieved. Some of those things we haven't achieved. And I think what was really interesting during the period of time that we had COVID is that, not had COVID, but did the tapings in Jacksonville for every week show, just seeing that community kind of develop, because we also were trying to, try the styles out of, hey, can you do wrestling with no audience there? Hey, can you make it as cost effective as you can so that maybe you're getting 2 weeks of TV at a time? And so you're going in cycles of on and off. And that was very different. We always developed AEW to be a media property. It was always meant to be, it wasn't about house shows or other stuff. It was about creating content that would be then consumable for the fans and consumable for TV rights holders and broadcasters and things.
That's really where the opportunity is. From a revenue point of view is the TV rights fees.
I think it's one of the big ones.
It's a media business,
yeah.
more so than it was a live event business before.
Yeah, maybe. I think it evolves, all the time. Like what I say whenever I give talks to people about the economics of wrestling, the thing I spend a lot of time with them is come up with as many streams that you think that exist and going down all those ones. And what I always tell people is your best bet is study WWE, see what they're doing, see what they're successful in. Talk to people that are smart and say, what are other businesses doing to monetize their content, but then also to monetize their brand. And so you have so much licensing you can do and other stuff. I don't know if I had a clear vision when we started of all the things that I wanted us to do. Now there's a lot of elements that maybe I didn't at the time. NFTs were not a thing 3 years ago, but now people want to talk about that. So you really always have to adapt what you're thinking about. So 3 years ago, much more focused on, running the shows, getting the TV contract, but also just the idea of like, if you build it, will they come? I was never sure of that. And I think when we got the big stars that like really people were shocked that
You're not sure if there was like a fan appetite for this alternative?
you just don't know how, like if NXT is only running, a couple hundred people shows and
They were kind of the alternative.
yeah,
to
and
main roster WWE.
and Ring of Honor wasn't, blowing up at the time. They were doing okay. They had done some good business with the Bucks and with the Hardys.
New Japan's trying to do US
And then New
stuff.
Japan was in the U.S. already started at that point, or was about to start. There was just a lot of interesting competition. And then also, even when you and I spoke 3 years ago, the Bucks and Cody and people will say, we didn't sign our contracts until such and such date. That was in 2019 that they signed their contracts. So everybody says, yeah, I'm in it. I'm in it to win it. Everyone is smiles and joy. But when pen to paper, that's when you're going to find out, are people going to actually make moves that could be difficult for them down the line if it doesn't work out? And on the flip side, who else is going to want to come? Like, it's easy to put names on a page and say, hey, this would make a great roster. It's a lot harder to negotiate with all those people and make it happen. So I had a lot of uncertainty at that time about that. And I didn't know how the TV business felt about wrestling.
Yeah.
Wrestling is been hot cold in TV programmers' mind. Like, it's not like anyone doubts that Raw doesn't do great numbers. And even with their declines, they're still number one on cable. Mm-hmm. And those are strong numbers for any station. But there's always that perception of wrestling and the questions about how does that make people feel, and is that the direction they want to go? I mean, you wouldn't see so many of these networks spending on original programming if they were just trying to do it as cheaply as possible.
Yeah.
So it's clear to them that there's some other element that causes them to want to invest in things. And the question was, is wrestling that sort of thing that intrigues them, or is it not?
Yeah. I've noticed some of the comments that Punk has made since he's joined AEW about how he had some early discussions since Tony. It sounds like they were talking since very early on in the AEW project. But he was hesitant whether, how is this really going to go? I think he had to see it happen and exist for a while before it gained his trust. It's kind of along the lines of, is there sort of a business acceptance for a new wrestling product? Like I don't know, not to put lavish praise on your boss, but like I don't know if there is another person who checks all of the boxes in such a way that makes something like AEW possible in terms of having the sports background, being well connected in the media and the sports business, and having the understanding of wrestling that he did coming up as a newsletter reader, tape trader. There have been a lot, like sort of along the lines of what Punk has said in some of his interviews. Like there's like a guy that would crop up every 30 days who want, we're gonna do TV, we're gonna do this big thing, and you and I may have been called by some of these people, but this was different.
Yeah, I think it was definitely different in the sense that knowing the money was there was big, and knowing that the money was not necessarily it wasn't set up like a venture capital firm where it's like, all right, now we need to cash out, let's go. It was set up with the idea of being like, let's invest, let's grow, let's build, this is going to be great. And that was unusual, is that you don't always have that. You have a lot of people that are a little bit more get rich quick scheming in this kind of field. So that's tough. I think the fact that they, I say for a while that the authenticity of the brand came from the authenticity of the wrestlers. There's no allegiance to AEW when we started because those are just letters. What they were believing in was the experiences they had seen with the Young Bucks, with Cody Rhodes, with Chris Jericho, or with Kenny Omega and so forth. Like, they believed in that interactions that they had, and we traded on that. That's why we were able to sell merchandise. That's why we were able to have good pay-per-views. Mm-hmm. But I can't put words in CM Punk's mouth about how long we were talking or this or that, but certainly I was aware for a long time that he would be someone in the marketplace who might be right. And I think he is also someone who, love him or hate him, has always been a very authentic person and connects with people authentically. And I see that at the shows where people really, 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 have a strong aptitude towards what he's doing, and they're excited that he's there, and they're excited that he's back in here. And so that takes a long time to kind of prove to them also that you're going to take the time to care about wrestling. And any business is going to be managed, and you can have two different kinds of managers and be successful with both of them, and they might have a different style. So I don't know if I always agree, Tony Khan's the only person on earth who could possibly do this. Because you could do this, you just would have to manage it differently. Mm-hmm. Tony loves to be in the creative. He loves to be in the business. He loves to eat, sleep, and breathe this. But I could also see someone a little bit more like the WWE model, where elements of it, they say, I'm going to move over to this person, and your job is to worry about this all day, and my job is to worry about this all day. And we work together to make sure we're creating this cohesive vision. So it's something where we do have the right manager, and we do have the right playbook, and that's great. I'm glad it works. But everything in retrospect is much easier to kind of have clarity on compared to when you're starting and you're going by the seat of your pants. You really don't know what it is. Like, it's a blur. It just feels like every week you're just literally being like, oh, we're doing this now. Oh, this is happening. And like, you're constantly just trying to keep up. And so 52 weeks a year is tough for TV. That's a lot of time for you to be spending. And so, getting the first year under your belt gives you sea legs.
Yeah. So especially in the last few months, I'm just thinking about TV ratings. NXT in April moved to Tuesday. And since then, AEW Dynamite has done really good ratings, better than they were doing before. Mm-hmm. Especially since those 5 weeks came to an end where you're preempted to different nights. We've seen a lot of 1 million viewers, and the key demo, which is about half of the total audience, doing well. A lot of number one on cable rankings. Mm-hmm. And when I listen to other non-wrestling podcasts like Lightshed, and they're starting to talk more and more about AEW when they bring up WWE and things like that. And to people outside of the wrestling space, maybe who don't know what's going on in wrestling as well, why do you think, or how would you explain to them, why is AEW resonating? There's this huge player in wrestling that's dominated the wrestling world for at least 2 decades. But all of a sudden there's this other brand here that's coming up and that's doing increasingly well, it seems. Why is that?
I've had people say, wow, you're in this marketplace and there's already a big number one there. Why would you want to be in a competitive marketplace like that? And what I usually say to them is a few things. One, I think that there's plenty of market share, because I think there's tons of people that want to watch wrestling and that are addressable to find your product and to consume it. So I don't think that there's a challenge there where it's like such a limited group of people. Like, they try to break cricket into the US every couple years, and they've
huge in India.
Exactly. Huge in India, huge in Australia and a lot of other places, UK. But it's one of those where I don't know if there's enough fans of it here to make that successful, unless they really change the way it's being produced or I shouldn't say produced, but marketed and introduced to everyone. And so I do think wrestling is unique in that sense that there's A, plenty of market demand and market share that you can have. B, I think that we do have different models when it comes to different elements of the business. So for instance, the way the training works. You definitely see WWE with a very strong emphasis on hiring professional shot putters and track athletes and those sort of things and turning them into wrestlers, versus AEW has found a lot of success with not only finding people very early on in their career and saying, hey, let's do something Julia Hart, let's do something Lee Johnson, let's continue to bring you in and mold you, but most of those people are coming from the independent scene, And so when you have, Eddie Kingston is one example where we brought Eddie in to wrestle Cody for the TNT title one time. That was the deal. There was no long-term goal. There was no anything else set up.
And right on live TV on TNT too.
Yeah.
Not like a dark thing. It
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah.
gradual. It was boom. Here's a big match.
And so it was kind of sink or swim. And Tony was like, I love this. This is great. Let's do it. And like that was enough. And Tony got into it. And I think that Eddie is one of those people that his love and charisma translates in a way that you can never teach. And so that's great. And I think, we have a point of differentiation when it comes to stuff like that we have that. 3, we just have a different schedule. And so we're creating a different working environment for people. What a lot of people say is, hey, I really like the fact that you guys are set up to tape in this way and not in this other way. And this gives us free time on this, the weekends more. And
it's an easier schedule with fewer dates.
Usually, yeah. For most of these people, that's what I'd say. I mean, you're still getting on the road almost every week, and that's a grind. Like that's tough because it's tough to take vacation or change anything.
But
there.
WWE's still doing house shows comparatively.
Exactly. So I think there's that. I think that we are also we have different merchandising strategy. For instance, right? Like AEW, a guy like Brody Lee, I think he had 4 shirts put out. 3 or 4 shirts during his time. And he would talk about how he never had his own shirt once in all of WWE. Even the yeah, that when it got over, didn't get his own shirt that said that. There's bootleg shirts that came out, but that's about it. And that says something to me just about also our strategy that we took in terms of we sometimes do more is more. We very much have been of the mindset like, hey, let's make sure that we give people the opportunity to vote with their dollars and show us what they like. And then you know what? Print on demand means you don't have to worry so much about like, is it inventory sitting there or not? So I like that. Our YouTube strategy is something that's evolved, but I would still say in some ways it's totally different than the way that WWE was doing their YouTube strategy. Our YouTube strategy is let's develop content that's going to live on YouTube. That means if you don't have cable, you can still follow AEW and you'll see original stuff. And then I can also look at the metrics and say, oh gosh, we're really getting a huge percentage of people in India. I can now go to these people and say, look, don't tell me that AEW is new and you don't know anything about it. I can tell you lots about it. Here's how many millions of people watch it in your country. Here's the things that they're saying.
When you're talking to a potential
yes, yeah. And like in just, experiencing those things. And so I know WWE has done some internet type shows in the past, but I don't feel like they necessarily have always built a brand quite the same way we did with our Dark and Dark Elevation.
I guess for like in-ring programming that is specifically for...
Exactly. Like they put a lot of... like we learned a lot from WWE when it comes to
I guess early
how to
NXT
use YouTube.
Would kind of be that. That was an internet-only show. But
Yeah, exactly. So just that element of like, I feel like we're doing things different than they are when it comes to small parts of that. Mm-hmm. I think that we also... You can't have contempt for your audience. And I think it's important to like recognize when your audience is giving you feedback, what does it mean? And what's interesting is that there's some people too that the wrestlers I think have a good voice to be able to say, I want to do this. And that's sometimes enough to get the ball rolling. So like Daniel Garcia with 2.0, when he's out there wrestling with Jon Moxley, part of that is I think Moxley wanted to work with him, and so it's that kind of stuff where it's like, oh, there's special moments where you realize like, oh, this wrestler wanted to do this, and then we gave them an opportunity to do it, and that moves the ball forward, and that can really encourage people a lot. Which isn't to say that like every movie actor would have the best scripts if they wrote it themselves. Mm-hmm. That's not true. You do want to make sure that people are performing to their best. But I do think the idea generation part of it sometimes is a little bit different between the two companies in terms of, we don't have 50 writers. We don't have things like that. Tony's very intricately involved in writing the shows, and I think it does give a clearer vision for the way he would like the show to look.
Yeah. So just to think about ratings again, as I was going through the line chart in my mind of AEW's ratings have been doing better lately the last couple of months, and you've added CM Punk and Bryan Danielson,
yep.
And the 18 to 49 demo has edged out Raw by a small margin on two weeks in a row. Not this most recent week, but the 2 weeks prior to that. Do advertisers notice that, care about that? Does the network care about that? Or is Raw just another TV show in the grand scheme of TV shows that are on TV every week?
Definitely, people notice and care about you being successful. I will say that usually the things that actually get advertisers and other people excited is not the rating story as much as it's we sold out the Arthur Ashe Stadium, or here's a famous
profile.
Or here's a famous person who's working with Shaquille O'Neal wrestled on our show, and here's a footage of him in that match.
What you're associated with is a bigger deal to them than the numbers of your audience sometimes.
Do advertisers for sure. Like I don't find a lot of people saying to me, "Well, Raw does this," and trying to rub it in our face back. It's much more of like, "Oh, are you guys really full of momentum?" And we say, "Yeah, here's some examples of what we're doing." Like Little Uzi Vert is here on the stage, and then
Is a TikTok person?
I don't know. But I just mean from the standpoint of like, I think he's a rapper, and I think, but it's more of like the idea that like those things, then people say, this is something I can capture. Because part of it, people realize, is that like, it's not necessarily impossible to have a show that lots of people are watching and get paid for that. What's tougher is sometimes they really care a lot about live sports because those eyeballs might only watch the live sports. And that means those people are harder to reach versus the people that are going to sit there all day long and watch TV. Mm-hmm. So the reason that advertisers sometimes pay is that they want to capture an audience that they're not capturing with other shows. The other thing is they also want authentic things that connect with their brand and then the profile of their brand. So whether it's them saying, hey, energy drinks is something that this demo consumes a lot of, I want to make sure I'm on the right show to push that. But I think what you also have to do is to figure out how you're going to integrate that stuff. And, we've done, we did Bear Country versus Jurassic Express to promote Kong versus Godzilla. And like, that was example of kind of an interesting integration. And when we do stuff like that, that's fun because we can really excite advertisers by saying, here's an unusual way for you to do this. Yeah. Like State Farm's done a great job with us doing that.
What is State Farm?
Is
this what you call integrating sponsors into your product, right?
I mean, State Farm, we've done some custom things where we did superfan experiences. So one of them was a superfan who really wanted to be a ring announcer. And so we had him work with Justin Roberts, and then he got to come to the show, and then he ring announced in the arena. And then like we had the Young Bucks come out and do their whole entrance, and he had no idea that was happening. That was really cool. We did one where we had a super fan.
And this is a State Farm advertising.
It was a State Farm integration.
This guy like proposed to his girlfriend. Is that part of that?
I don't think so.
Okay, anyway.
But there might have been something like that. There was another one where there was a woman and her husband. They were big wrestling fans, but they hadn't been able to go to a show. And so we said, we'll bring a show to you. And so we had a ring pull up on a truck. And then like SCU wrestled, I think against Jurassic Express, like in this woman's front yard. Okay. And it was great. So like those kind of things.
And we just like, there's a State Farm logo there? Or?
Yep. Yeah. And then they'll just say, hey, this is State Farm. We do these super fan experiences. It's just remember that State Farm is sponsoring it. And like
a good neighbor.
Yeah. So that kind of stuff is really fun and cool.
Yeah. So when people have asked WWE executives what about AEW, it sort of gets downplayed as, well, of course, everything is our competition. Nick Khan specifically said, sleep is our competition. Like, what do you... They're trying to message away from the idea that there's another wrestling player out here that is, I don't know, a threat to them. Do you think, and WWE is not a wrestling company, they try to express that they're a media company and so forth. Is AEW a wrestling company? Do you view WWE as competition, as the closest competitor to AEW?
I'm not answering this question as a guy who works in AEW. Or as AEW's view. I want to make sure that that's clear.
This is Chris Harrington.
This is just what I think, and that's important to say. Is that like other people might have a very different view, and that's right. And I don't know what our company's view is necessarily. To me, of course people are going to compare us to WWE because we're both wrestling companies, and I think we are firmly entrenched now as the second largest wrestling company in the world. I personally believe that.
Yeah, I think in terms of revenue, that's what I believe to be the case. Yes,
Yeah.
for one thing.
So we have a desire to keep growing, and we don't want there to be impediments for us to grow.
Mm-hmm.
So that's always going to be part of it. Their competition for sure, but for us, other sporting events on television that steal either
The Masked Singer.
the Masked Singer, the Challenge, the Guys Grocery Games, like
Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. Is
yes,
the other one that I see, yes.
but I
Big Brother.
Yeah, I remember at one point that when we were getting beat by Guys Grocery Games, and we were like, and then when they were way down on the list the other week, and I remember sending it to I think Cody Rhodes, and I was just like, we got him, and so they are competition in that sense. But they're competition for dollars, for sure. And there are times that you can have a very large brand, and they might say, well, I only want to work with either WWE or AEW. Like, they're not going to always say, hey, I want to sponsor both companies. Like, they want to kind of plant their flag and go. So you do have to work with the fact that,
So advertisers, some business partners see that as a conflict. To not, they don't want to work with both, some of them.
I would say there's a possibility that some brands will say, I'm already spending on blank, and they don't have an interest to just spend on both brands. They're going to spend on one or the other, specifically when there's some kind of a very particular type of integration, like certain services. But I know I'm not being very specific on that, but you do see that sometimes versus, sometimes people are just, it's rare that people are like literally directly spending just with you. Mm-hmm. A lot of times you're buying advertising on a television network, and then you're working with them to where you can program that advertising. Mm-hmm. And so it's across many shows. So, it's not always so much as like, oh, should I buy it on Raw or should I buy it on Dynamite? There's a lot of other pieces going on. But I don't know if obviously we're competition, but we're also barometers for each other. I feel like COVID was the great equalizer when it came to the fact that they and us both had to run shows with no people there, and then try to decide what does that do to your tour schedule? What does that do to your needs as a company? What does that do to your creative process? And then also, now that we're both going out on the road and touring again, you have that great barometer to kind of look at each other and say, oh, well, how are they doing in these markets? How are we doing in these markets? And that can be really helpful, too, to kind of get an idea of, is this localized to what I'm doing, or is this the general...
You both have a show coming up at the UBS arena
we do.
Long Island, very, very close to each other, just over a week apart.
I think 9 days apart or something. Yeah.
A Raw and a Dynamite. And it looks like AEW's ticket sales are ahead at this point.
I have no idea. I've read that, I've heard that, but I don't know what WWE is selling. I don't get their ticket reports, so I would have to go.
There's a great Patreon called WrestleTix. I'll have to turn you on to.
I'll check it out.
So, I guess one more thing along the lines of a comparison between AEW and WWE. The big unanswered question to me about the future outlook of the wrestling business. The wrestling business is so shaped by whatever the future is going to be for media rights, especially live media rights. I tend to believe that the future looks good for WWE's TV rights as networks, and maybe even some other non-network players like the major tech companies might come up and start to bid for live TV rights. That might include WWE. I think their TV ratings are doing well enough, and they're ranked highly enough that I would tend to think they're gonna do well. They'll probably get a moderate increase. I think AEW is in a position that they're, in my view, clearly undervalued by probably multiples in their next deal. But is there any way in which people who are trying to understand the wrestling business, like me, are the values of these two live sports properties, W and AEW, do they have any bearing on one another?
Sure. Definitely being able to say, hey, AEW would not have gotten into this business if we didn't see the rights that WWE was commanding and be able to say, oh, there's some investment going on here, and there's still probably an opportunity for more players in this marketplace, and there's money that can be spent, and we will be economical and we believe creatively viable choice, alternative, investment, whatever, to also join this. So that was important to us. I think that we should, when you talk about what should I worry about, just like we were talking about earlier, NFTs wasn't a thing 3 years ago, but they're a thing now. So you got to be thinking a lot about revenue stream things that maybe it's media rights, but media rights is a very particular bucket because you could also say it's TV advertising, and that's different than media rights. It could be about OTT money. It could be about, SVOD or AVOD or, getting involved in FAST or getting involved in...
There are different kinds of media revenue.
Yeah. And I guess not just media revenue, but like just the idea that, yes, right now it's big networks paying a lot of money for the rights for a deal or Peacock or someone paying the rights for a library along with special events. We're still in the pay-per-view business. I work very hard on the pay-per-view side, and that's, the 4 events we're doing a year. We just had our most successful event ever. That's no secret. And that's, I'm monetizing this content in a very discreet way at a very discreet time. And maybe that's what the future's like, but maybe there's some other way that you have that financial transaction so that you can still get value from that event, but it's in some other way.
If I'm a TV network and negotiation time looks to be about 2 years from now, maybe the middle of 2023 for WE, maybe somewhere around that time for AEW, depending. I understand there's an option that could extend, and I think probably will extend the Warner Media AEW deal. Like, if I'm a TV executive, does the mere existence and relative success of AEW sort of make me think, well, why should I pay X for Raw SmackDown when there's Dynamite / Rampage that's doing comparably in some categories?
I have no idea. I never worked for a TV network, so I don't
talk to them.
I do, but I talk to them from my side. I don't know how they think about it on their side. I don't know how they position their choices as that. Do they really say, oh, I'm deciding whether or not to buy this wrestling show or that wrestling show? I would say more that, they're deciding, what do I program? What does that audience, that programming bring? How much does it cost for us to be involved with this? And, just like we're talking about how next year AEW Dynamite will move to TBS and AEW Rampage will stay on TNT. That's because when you think of your slate of times, you when you plant a flag to say this show is going to be on at this time 52 weeks a year, that's a big investment from a programming standpoint. And I don't think that anyone says, oh, I'm choosing my wrestling program to put on here. They're just choosing what are they going to program in a steady slot for these periods of time. And so, for instance, Warner Media made an investment in hockey rights. And so they'd made the choice to bring in hockey rights as part of what they think they want to put on their programming. But that means they have to be very careful then about what they're thinking as their portfolio. So a lot of times it's not so much like, hey, I want wrestling, I don't want wrestling, as much as what does this look like compared to everything else that I'm doing?
They just want to do what's best for their network, what's going to make them...
Yeah, and also, like, what's their vision? Like when MTV plays ridiculousness for 23 hours a day, there's a vision there. Like, there's a reason they're doing that. But also, the 1 hour that they're not playing that, you don't expect them to put on Oprah. Like, it's got to be in line with what the rest of the network is doing and what they've carved that to be. So to me, that's the idea, is that these programmers and these networks really do view it that way. Like, what kind of audience am I building for my network? And, what's great is a lot of these portfolios have multiple choices. So True TV, that's much more focused on the live event
True
reality.
crime.
Or just like unscripted shows. Then TBS is a little bit more focused on the scripted shows. And TNT is much more focused on the sports and action. Drama. Yeah. So I think that's, part of the idea there is that's what you're competing with is what's the vision and the cost and the pros and cons.
Rampage, it was announced recently that Rampage was originally going to go to TBS along with Dynamite in 2022. That's not happening, though. Rampage is staying on TNT. Correct? I got that all straight?
Rampage will continue to be on TNT in 2022.
But it was originally going to move over with with Dynamite to TBS?
I don't remember the cadence of what the press releases said. I think we announced that we were moving to TBS, and I don't remember whether we got as specific as saying all the shows are not on the shows. Part of it is, you do want a message in advance of a move, but if a move is that many months off, sometimes it's not that important to like spend all the time being in the details and the weeds with everybody and be like, on this date, this exact thing is going to happen 9 months from now. Like, so I think it was more to just kind of set the stage originally, and the fact that at the time Rampage had not been launched. So it's very hard to like talk about, well, what was the plan for Rampage originally when the show had never even aired once. So a lot of things were fluid. But yes, I don't know if we originally had said that it was going to stay on TNT, but we always knew that there was going to have to be some juggling that would happen here in order for us to find just the right time slots. Now, the success of Rampage, I think, then also changes that thinking, because, if something's working, you don't want to mess with it. If something's not working, you might actually try different things. When Dynamite was moving all around the schedule back in May for the playoffs, we could see what happened when we tested out Friday nights, Saturday nights, all these other things where that was Tuesday, I think, or Thursday at one time we might have even done. We did late night Thursday one time.
In the September or August 2020 preemption.
But I just mean, like, we learned something from that, and then we use that to reinforce future decisions. Mm-hmm. So a lot of thinking went into all of this to kind of say, oh, what are we seeing and where can we find success on? And the good news is we think that, our audience will not only come with us and find us, but I think it will be a boost to both networks. So we love being part of that.
My wild speculation would have been that Rampage now is six or I guess 7 episodes in, we have 6 ratings. Was doing so well or well enough that somebody said, well, maybe we just keep it on TNT. Maybe that's the best place for it.
And also just got to keep in mind different nights of the week, right? So the competition for certain time slots is very different throughout the week.
And hockey is going to be a Wednesday night for TNT for turn. That's a traditional NHL night.
If that's when it normally is on, I believe it.
Yeah. So can you walk us through the process that an advertiser makes for a TV ad? And like how far in advance is that? That's like a quarter in advance, I think, that an advertiser buys a slot, something like that.
I mean, a lot of advertising is sold at the upfronts, and which are in May every year. Yeah. Roughly. So I mean, but also a lot is sold right in Q4 as well. So I don't know if I can totally answer your question, because again, I'm not an advertiser, so I don't quite know, the details of their planning cycle and cadence. But, every quarter there's a different amount of spend that happens, and a lot of different industries have different times that they're going to push. If you're a hot dog maker, you're obviously going to want to make sure you're all about July. But, December's maybe not your strongest suit. So you would have to imagine that their spend is going to be different throughout those different quarters. In general, I think these big brand portfolios, they usually make a minimum commitment spend, and then they always have the options of, do they want to ramp up that spend or ramp down that spend over the course of a year? And so a lot of times, if a show is being really successful, you might see people saying, yeah, let me spend more on this sector and this time of the year. A lot of times they have guaranteed minimums of kind of what they have to do every quarter. So it's not like you can just be like, well, I don't like this at all, I'm not spending any more money. It's like, no, you've committed to all this. I'll give you more variance here, and then maybe other times it's very, very much more like this is what you spend and this is what happens. And again, a lot of budgets are use it or lose it. So in a certain sense of marketing, if people don't spend their budget, then they're not always going to get it back. So I do also think that there's a lot of this commitment here that exists just because everyone wants to have the regularity of knowing what they're doing and what their competitors are doing, but everybody kind of has agreed to spend that money. That said, one of the reasons Nielsen ratings mean something in that industry is people believe that gives them some data about who's watching their shows, and that the profiles that they can get from that data, whether it's about income or age or gender or race split, size of county that you live in, etc.
Mm-hmm. AEW has the most affluent TV audience in wrestling, I believe is how Tony Khan put it to Bloomberg, which sounds like the median income for AEW fans is higher than it is for at least WWE viewers and maybe Impact viewers too. Those are the ones.
That's what we're told. I mean, I don't get a chance to go and survey everyone and get their tax returns.
But that's Nielsen data.
But the Nielsen data tells us that, and that's exciting. And I do think that helps with advertisers and sponsors to say to them, look, I've got this group of people that have money to spend. And, you know, I would love if car commercials ran all through AEW programs. But, you know, you do have to you build to it. And hopefully we will continue to build with that. But I think those are really good signs for us. And they are small points of differentiation that we can also give to people when they're asking questions about, you know, the number one question you get from a brand is usually, who watches your show? They don't know very much about wrestling or things. Who watches your show? Who are your stars? You know, those are the things that they want to know a lot of times. So this kind of data is really what people are asking you for.
And then someone showed me the breakdown among race, and it looks like WWE has been, and probably for years has been, over-indexing among people of color, and particularly among black people. Their viewership by percentage is something well in excess of 20%, which is, and I think the universe, as far as people watching TV generally, is in the high teens of percent. And AEW it looks to be more along the lines of what the universe generally is there. I'm just wondering if is AEW missing on capturing an audience of people of color that it still needs to work to capture, that maybe are more used to and more accustomed to, more brand loyal to WWE.
I don't know if we are missing on that opportunity as much as we are actively working all the time to bring more fans in for wrestling. And on top of that, I think that Tony Khan would say he has brought in a lot of incredibly talented, diverse faces and given them prominent roles on our show, as they've earned prominent roles on our show, because he has a great interest in reflecting all of that. Mm-hmm. And so whether it's, you know, a match where, you know, Red Velvet is in there in the middle, or Jade Cargill, or other people like that who we're developing new opportunities with, we think that's great. And, you know, TNT obviously has the NBA, which also has a very large African-American population that watches it regularly. So we know that, you know, that we're on a network definitely that addresses a lot of people that they do have. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, I would say, you know, the community initiatives that we're working on right now, when Mark Henry came on board, you know, Mark has been very interesting getting to know him, because I remember he would just straight tell you, he's like, I go to a boys and girls club in a city, and I tell them about AEW, and I say, now it's your turn. I need you to show up. I need you to be seen here. I'm inviting you. I'm making the effort to come to see you. I'm asking
connections. To
but and especially in people of color, like that's something that Mark is really passionate about, where he's like, I want to make sure that like all these communities feel like they're being represented, they're being seen, and and that diversity and that acceptance is part of this. And you know, for me, when I have a brand or an advertiser say, hey, I saw Sunny Kiss, that was really cool. And I'm like, okay, it connects and it makes sense to somebody here, this opportunity to highlight or spotlight this person that maybe would not have got an opportunity to do that in other companies or other places. Mm-hmm. And I love that. And we'll just continue to try to grow our share of audience of all people. But I certainly would say it's something that we think about. We do definitely think about, and we care about. You know, we do think that there's maybe not always been as many opportunities given to everybody equally. And it's good to give them that and opportunities to have like some mentorship and discussion. So it's great to have leaders like Mark in the company who can, you know, really say, this is what his life been like for me in my career of doing this, and this is what this experience is like, and to have those serious chats. And certainly, you know, when we put a BLM, Black Lives Matter thing before one of our Dynamites, you know, we had a lot of people say terrible things to us after that. And Tony's response was really simple. He's just like, forget them. I have no interest in you if you're offended by that. I'm setting out, I'm making this statement, and he himself, as someone who is a child of an immigrant, is from a Pakistani father. That says a lot too about his experience, where he thinks about, the fact that it's important that we give people these opportunities and we reach out to people and say what's happening, and we're trying to listen. We're trying to listen. That's for sure.
And maybe this is where we can talk about the Roads to the Top is coming up. Is that debuting?
I think next week or this week,
Wednesday,
actually. This week
after Dynamite.
Either after or before. I'm a bad PR person that I don't know which one it is.
I think it's next week after Wednesday's Dynamite, or this coming week. Is what I meant to say.
Yes.
We know that the narrative, and I don't have data old enough to confirm this, but Total Divas premiered in 2013. Many people believe or will argue that Total Divas coincided with an increase in female viewership for WWE. Is a reality show scripted? I don't know what's the preferred.
I think I think they call it unscripted
entertainment.
Yeah.
Is Roads to the Top an opportunity to maybe capture some additional female viewers and to funnel them into your in-ring programming?
So I don't work on Roads. I don't
not even female viewers necessarily, but just new viewers.
I don't work on Roads to the Top, so I
Will you
can't.
be appearing on Roads to the Top?
I might actually be in one scene in Roads to the Top.
Will you be there with your Excel on your laptop?
No.
I'm hoping for that.
No. But I don't work on Roads to the Top, so I can't say what the vision was when it comes to what were the goals that they were setting for themselves. I think for us.
But that's part of the AEW company, right? That's not something that's being done independent of All Elite Wrestling, the Roads to the Top program.
There are people working on it who like Tony has a vested interest in Roads to the Top because it is part of what the media creation that we're doing. It is one element of it. What I'll say is to us, it's more that it's an opportunity where people said, this story interests us. They would like to do it. We have the right people who know how to create this kind of a show, meaning you have to have editors that understand how do you pace this stuff and people that are experienced with shooting in some very, private, semi-public places. It's very awkward the way, think about when you see them eating dinner or eating at a restaurant, but then you're forgetting the fact that means that there's cameramen all around that restaurant huddled in a corner doing that. And just imagine at a wrestling show with 200 to 300 people having an extra camera crew following people down the hallway and things. It's a tight squeeze. But to me, I think the idea was that they liked the story and they thought there was interest there. Mm-hmm. They liked the personalities that they realized these people are, Cody and Brandy are beautiful people. So they're perfect for having their face and do this. And they're charismatic, outgoing people. They love to be in that spot. And we do think that there's a demand for people to understand more about the world of wrestling and the worlds that impact wrestling. I don't know if Roads to the Top will feel like it's more about wrestling or more about the Rhodes family. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. That's their life is both those things. Mm-hmm. So who is it going to appeal to? I do think there's going to be new fans that don't know anything about AEW. They're going to see this and they're going to be intrigued because they enjoy this type of programming, and they will then get more into seeing those interactions with AEW and how those storylines cross. Part of the challenge is that Dynamite is weekly in the now. Any show like this is taped in the back. Mm-hmm. So there's the getting all these timings just right and correct can be very difficult. So Cody coming back and wrestle this week was great, especially leading into the show. But just think about all the content on the reality show is months removed from when it was filmed. Mm-hmm. So it's sometimes hard to have quite the synergy exactly from one thing to the other. I also think that Total Divas made the Bellas big stars.
Yeah.
I don't know if it made them big wrestling stars as much as it just made them big stars. And I think that's okay too, is that, their success doesn't necessarily have to be just necessarily goes in one direction. It has to be this one factor. Like, you're now a great attendance draw. Like,
they're a media company, not just a wrestling company.
Well, but I just mean, like, that's fine. That's great for them that, like, they are finding success for these people. And the wrestlers as independent contractors are going to want that success. And that's another version of success. And you know what? People like to act. People like to sing. People like to create art and poetry and other things. And, like, I think when they have ways to fully express it in more than one way, that's cool.
I think you've got to go in a little bit.
A little bit.
It is now 3:08.
I'm all right for a little bit here.
How much more time do we have then?
Maybe about 20 minutes.
20 minutes. Okay. We'll do like one more question.
That's
let
fine.
you go here. You are involved in making these TV deals. Is that correct?
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
A lot of times, yeah.
And TV deals are the most important piece of revenue among the biggest wrestling companies in the world. Like, what? It's hard for me to imagine. Like, what are the skills that are important for somebody who's representing a wrestling company or whatever property? What are the skills that are important to have when you're making those deals and trying to get the best possible deal for your company?
I would say the first thing is, it sounds trite and silly, but think of it as a partnership, not as a deal, in the sense that you and this person represent your brand now. So going forward, are they going to be a good represent you in a way that is going to help you? Where are they programming you? How are they programming? Who watches their station? Are you the right program for them? Mm-hmm. Like, that's really important to me, is making sure that you are the right program for them and they're the right ones for you. And that, is the audience that you think is interested in you able to get that program and in the way that they want to consume it. So we have a Hindi version of AEW Dynamite that's on Sundays on Eurosport. Mm-hmm. And that's great to me, that's the point. Like, you need to put it into the way that they want to do that so it can be consumed. And figuring that out is a big part of the deal. So not even money or anything else. It's just, how are you going to get my program there? What does it mean to you? And how do you feel about this content? Because we range all the way from Orange Cassidy and Chris Jericho fighting in a giant orange vat to Nick Gage wrestling Chris Jericho and there's a pizza cutter. There's a pretty large extremes that we can have highs and lows. And you got to make sure that both of you are on the same page about what that creativity could look like. And that the next question always to them is, I say, tell me your marketing plan. Tell me how you're going to make this a big deal. Mm-hmm. And I say, tell me about what connections you have that are going to help us and why we're here. Because I don't want to make any deal that's like 6 months long. I want to make a multi-year deal where I say, I'm investing in you and you're investing in me. Mm-hmm. ITV is a great example of that in the UK, where we started with ITV in the beginning, and we offer certain shows that are the 2-hour version and a 1-hour version. We offer, other content, and we get to have so much exposure through that. And from the very beginning, ITV supported us and was interested in us, and we were able to work with them and make this successful. At the same time, we have the AEW Plus service in the UK, and that's super successful. And so that's an example of where I have a arrangement where I can have more than one type of deal, where I can say there's different ways for me to reach different fans. And that's really, really important to me of that. The technical specs of television is unbelievably important. And we just think of it as, you record the show and you give it. But it makes a world of difference whether people are going to be getting it through satellite feeds, through digital feeds, through physical tapes, through...
You're talking about transferring the video to the broadcast.
Not just that, but you have to give them kind of an encoded version of the file. For instance, we usually have an audio, probably I think it's 6-channel audio. And for instance, one of the channels is just basically the sound of the crowd with no announcer or anything else. So that if you have to redub the show... in local language, you will have all the sounds of the crowd and what's happening, but you won't have the announcers or other people. But getting that special kind of 6-channel thing sent out and encoded, whether NTSC or PAL or all the other things, getting that specifically ironed out with these distributors around the world is huge. And then also a lot of it is like different companies have huge ecosystems. So when you're in their ecosystem, sometimes it's much easier to share the content because you can say, hey, this is actually already living on your server. You just need to turn it on for this country and they can show it. Versus every time you make a new deal, that's a new bank arrangement and financial discussions, that's new technical stuff. And then if you yourself are paying any money involved in the transmission of the stuff, every time you're adding a partner, you might also be paying for that cost of the Amazon server or other kind of bandwidth things that happen with it. And then the editing time.
It's not just as easy as putting it in a Dropbox and
no,
saying, here you go.
and not just that. Every country has different lengths. So the UK show is actually a few minutes longer than the US show. The US show is usually formatted as, I think, a 6-segment or an 8-segment show, and the UK show is like formatted as a 12-segment show.
Why is that?
Because of the way they program their time slots. They have less commercials, so they have to fill more minutes per hour. Okay. Our average show might have like 44 minutes per hour, and theirs might be like 48.
Just fewer commercials.
I believe it's fewer commercials, but they put the commercial breaks in different spots, and that's what makes it so tough. Almost all the other people, they can kind of do it in the U.S. format, but certain countries. So you then are re-editing your show. Mm-hmm. My show goes off the air at 10 p.m. UK time, it's almost morning. They want it by then. It's got to go to standards and practices because that's under UK law. So like that is really tough because now I'm putting editing resources into that. So when you're making a new deal, you have to understand the fully burdened cost to your own organization to be able to work together and be partners on this. Mm-hmm. And there are times that you like, I'm never going to say, hey, I don't want to give this show at all to country X. But I will say it doesn't make sense for us to create a burden on the whole organization at the cost of this much added value right now. WWE and other people have huge teams that have been built up over the years to do this. We are still in a much more maturing phase when it comes to that stuff. So it's just a balance of you have to make sure that you're doing the right things, and then you really want to spend a lot of time thinking about what's the marketing message you have for these countries. Mm-hmm. When we debuted TNT on TNT Africa Dynamite, we had Angelico do a whole media press tour with them. Phone calls. Because he's from South Africa. And they loved that. They loved that there was a connection to something local. And that's the same thing. When we do in the UK, we're putting the UK guys on. So that's the key, too. When we did, we just had our deal done in space in Latin America. Mm-hmm. And we did a whole press tour when they came out for the pay-per-view. And we had all our talent that, the Lucha Brothers and Ty Conti and people like that speaking to press in local languages, Spanish and Portuguese. Exactly. So that kind of stuff is really effective, but you also want to be like, oh, this is how I'm going to be successful. Mm-hmm. Because if you don't have those assets, a lot of times some countries will say, I really wish that I saw more athletes that were from my country on your show. And you have to be like, well, American work visas, it's not easy for me to get 50 people from another country into this country, get them work visas and have them all be stars. Like that's
they're interested in local stars sometimes.
So a lot of times you'll hear from certain countries that we believe our fans are much more likely to watch if they see people from our country in the show.
Who's the new Indian star who's just signed with AEW?
Satnam Singh, terrific.
Former NBA player?
Yeah, former NBA player. I believe worked for the Mavericks. Mm-hmm. 7'3", I want to say. And be really exciting to see his growth and experience. But he's already been a big star in India because of his NBA experience. And I'm really excited that he's taking this opportunity to share his talents with us. And I think he's going to be a really cool addition to the roster. And I think it even mentioned that probably he's training now a little bit more.
It might have. I got a press release.
Yeah,
I don't recall it.
So I think he's training, in fact, at the Nightmare Factory. So
okay.
You never know. Maybe Road to the Top, you'll see Satnam on there someday.
Yeah. Is Rampage now distributed in most international markets where you already have Dynamite?
Most, yeah. There's very few that I can think of that only have taken one show. Very, very, very few. Yeah. And that's great. What we've been most impressed by is that we can say to people, hey, there's one more hour, and they don't ever view it as a burden. They view it as a really cool opportunity, because for them now it feels like there's a lot more content coming every week, and B, it just grows the exposure possibility. And they like the fact that they have different formats. So a 1 hour show and a 2 hour show, they feel different in terms of how they flow and how they look. And they love that it's still high quality stuff. And the fact that most of the weeks it's being taped, meaning that they can consume it usually on a taped version, meaning you can get sent it over in advance rather than worrying about, oh God, can I get the live feed from all the way on the other side of the world? Is nothing going to go wrong today?
So you can get Rampage to them Wednesday night or something like
Well, it's not Wednesday night, but yeah,
Thursday.
yeah. I'm sure by Friday they get the show because it's on. But just that idea that like that is interesting. Like again, not something that fans necessarily care about, but broadcasters, they're thinking all about that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Okay. That's all the time I'm going to take up from you
All right.
for now.
Yeah.
But
Well, my wife is flying in here to go to the show, and so I
Yes,
keep
get to the
glancing
airport.
at keep glancing at my phone. So I got to go to the airport and pick her up. So
Yes.
that's where my distracted looks have been.
How can people get tickets to AEW?
Oh, go to
at the Blue Cross Arena on Sunday?
AEWTix.com. That has all our shows, AEWTix.com, and that will have links to any show that we're going to. We'll also have the information about what time the doors are and stuff like that. Like people always ask me, when's doors? And I'm like, I actually don't know. I show up at the arena at like 12:30. So, I'm there all day long. So I don't spend a lot of time thinking about doors as much as like our live event manager does. So it's just different for me. But I'm really looking forward to the Rochester show. I'm really looking forward to hopefully having some more Wrestlenomics, representation at our shows here. That hopefully someone's going to get on the road and come down, see us in Buffalo. Maybe he's going to drive all the way down, like you did before. Go for your weekend of WWE and AEW. Go down to the UBS Arena, see both shows, see what you think, see which one you liked more.
That's an idea. That's maybe we'll have to see if I have time for that on the schedule. That's in late November, early December. I think your show is early December.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So beyond that, just write us on Twitter, see us on Facebook, like the post, share, and find us on Friendster.
Mm-hmm. Follow him at Mookie Ghana on Twitter.
Yep.
And I don't know, everybody listening probably knows where to find me at Wrestlenomics, at Brandon Thurston. Sign up for the Patreon, patreon.com/Wrestlenomics. $5 a month to get all the TV ratings, reports that I do just about every weekday. You get access to the Wrestlenomics viewership spreadsheet, over 15,000 data points, something like that. It's a spreadsheet that I use and rely on to understand what's happening in the wrestling TV industry. So thanks everybody for listening. Thanks to Chris Harrington for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
For visiting the Wrestlenomics headquarters.
You bet.
And visiting the podcast once again. It's always great to have you here.
Thank you.
We'll talk to everybody next time.